Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming and thanks for joining us today for this Blandin Broadband Lunch Bunch session. This is one of the digital use and equity lunch bunches that we're holding on the fourth Wednesday of the month. And today we're going to talk about digital navigators. Ann Tracy is going to be facilitating the meeting, and she has lined up a couple of experts for us today. Ann?
Great. Thanks, Mary. Yeah, we'll kind of jump in, and as always, this is really meant to be a conversation. I'm grateful to have folks join us who are experts in the field, so that's fantastic. But I told them, don't prepare, we just want your brains. So we're really looking at starting with some questions. And I know this kind of bit me last month when I said, everybody introduce yourself and take some time, because we started with 15 people and there were 30 and we nearly ran out of time. But I still think it's important to give everybody a chance to just say hello, say where you're from, but maybe we'll do it in a little quicker aspect. Yeah, I'm Ann Tracy, and I write the Blandin on Broadband blog. I'm in Whitmer's protection here in Eau Claire, halfway home from Chicago. So that's where I am today. And I'll look, and the real issue here is that the sun is directly in my eyes here, but I'm going to try to call on folks so that people don't have to worry about when they're coming up. And
You want me to do that,
screen,
Ann?
oh, that'd be awesome, Mary. Thank you.
All right, so I'm just going to go down my list here. David Asp.
David Asp, Dakota County Government.
Thanks, David. How about Glenn Fishbein? Are you able to introduce yourself, Glenn, or should we move on? Feel free to jump in when you can. How about Teresa Sladek? Sorry if I mispronounced that.
Hello, it's Teresa Sladek, but 98% of the people say it wrong, so no problem. I'm with Literacy Minnesota, and I work in digital literacy and digital navigation.
Excellent. Barbara?
Hi, Barbara Klein, Lisa County Broadband Coalition and Blandin Broadband Community.
Thanks. How about Brooke Murphy?
Good day. This is Burke, and I am with Red Wing Ignite, and currently working on building out our tech ecosystem with a digital literacy, digital equity proposal.
All right, Jeff Playman.
Hey everybody, it's Jeff Plowman. I'm the online and digital learning specialist at the Department of Education.
How about Lee?
Hello, everyone. Sorry, I missed what I was supposed to share.
Oh, just your name and where you're joining us from.
Oh, okay. Lee Herr with the Department of Education. I'm actually Jeff's colleague.
Oh,
a pleasure to be here, everyone.
Thanks for jumping in so quickly.
Yeah.
How about Sarah Johnson Malco? You're muted.
Lister County Broadband Coalition and Blandin Community.
Thanks, Sarah. Scott?
Hi, Scott Cole with Collectivity. We support the Connected Minnesota initiative.
Thanks, Scott. Rye.
And Rye had left a note saying eating lunch but listening.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Or there you are. Great.
Yep, all up on Rye Marketilia McCracken, the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm down here in sunny Mankato, Minnesota.
Bernadine, do you want to introduce yourself?
Everybody, Bernadine Jocelyn with Blandin Foundation. I'm also listening in with ears from the Partnership for Collected MN that Scott Cole's supporting, introduce himself, and also with Mark Johnson, who's also on the call on the Governor's Broadband Task Force. And we are really caring a lot about digital literacy and policy options for the state. So I'm listening with those ears today.
All right. Nancy.
Hi, Nancy Hoffman with the Chisago County HRA EDA, and also on the Chisago Lakes area Blandin Broadband Community.
Joe Miller.
Hi, I'm Joe Miller. I'm also with Literacy Minnesota as their digital equity project manager. Great to be here today.
And I might ask a quick, because if I don't do it now, I know I'll forget, Joe. You
Right.
talked a little bit about you just mentioning a report that you folks just did.
Right. Yeah. If this would be a good time to share. Thank you for the time. And Blandin's conference in October helped a lot with it. And so did a meeting with Bernadine in November. So thank you to the Blandin Foundation. The report is a digital equity community needs assessment report that I wrote in collaboration with MDE. So with advice from Lee and Jeff on this call, and calls with Scott, and the collectivity group also support it. The report aims to show the efforts in Minnesota across the state with digital equity since the pandemic started. But what I really think it does well is show the stakes of digital equity. And that's because access to information online informs our relationships with our community and our government. That makes it a civil right. If you don't have access to a computer, to the internet, or to the skills to use those, then you cannot have an informed relationship with your community or with your government. The report shows where there are high priority needs by county. So there's a ranking of Minnesota's 87 counties. And it also recommends how a digital navigation project statewide would support available resources. At Literacy Minnesota, we think that safe and trusting relationships allow people to learn. And this project would focus on complementing trusted organizations and communities across the state by training digital navigators. If you'd like to learn more about the report, I'll drop a link in the chat, or you could message me questions on here on the Zoom, or send me an email. Thank you again for the time.
Okay, I think we just have a couple more people to introduce themselves before we let the experts introduce themselves. Becky?
Hi. Oh my God, what? Hello, everybody. It's so good to see you. And that literacy project sounds fantastic. So I'm Becky Laurie. I'm an owner of a company with 65 employees in Northern Pine County, which has terrible broadband. And we do eligibility determination and denial management for hospitals all over the country. Los Angeles County hospitals are our largest client. So broadband is really important to us. And yesterday, Pine County is going to work Blandin with you on that CBR Accelerate program. So thank you for that. Pine County is 84 of 87 counties in quality. And then I think I also am a member of Minnesota Farmers Union. And tomorrow, right following this meeting at 1 o'clock is Tools and Goals for Digital Marketing Success. So it's so important in every aspect. Thank you. I was quick, wasn't I?
Great.
Sure, yeah, definitely. Sherry, we're just introducing ourselves, just name and where our affiliation.
Hi, Sherry Danker with the Hormel Foundation, but I'm actually listening in as a member of the Austin community who's working on some broadband issues.
Ann, are you? Oh gosh, I think Ann might have been frozen up.
Yep. No.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just still, I think.
Oh, okay. All right. Good. Did you want to call on Paulo and Mark to introduce themselves when?
Sure. Why don't we just sort of do that? I'll provide a link in the chat to both of them. But it's Paulo, thank you for joining us. I know you were able to join us kind of in last minute, so I super appreciate you taking the time. But because you're the last in, I'll get started with Mark because he kind of knows the drill here. Just start, Mark, with telling us about you, about ECMAC, and a little bit about the digital navigation stuff that you're working on.
Sure. Thanks, Ann. Thanks everybody for joining us, and thanks for asking me to be part of this. I'm Mark Johnson. I'm the executive director of ECMAC. ECMAC is a telecommunications and distance learning cooperative of public schools in Minnesota. We have 14 members just north of the Twin Cities. So we're in East Central Minnesota. Becky's Pine County and Nancy's Chisago County, and then Isanti and Mille Lacs, Kanabec are kind of our region in Isanti. In Minnesota, we have about 38,000 students, K-12, that are in our member districts, and we do a number of education technology services for those districts. We also work very hard on broadband issues, because that's, of course, incredibly important to our students and families. And I've been involved in that advocacy for over a decade in this area, which is, I don't have a lot to hang my hat on, because as Becky said, Pine County is kind of lagging in the broadband world, and Kanabec County, unfortunately, is last. So I guess we haven't been all that successful, but we keep trying and we keep persevering, I guess is what I'm saying. I am, as Bernadine mentioned, I'm also a member of the governor's broadband task force. And I do a whole lot of other advocacy kinds of things on behalf of both my member districts that I work for, as well as the communities, the community where I live, and the communities around us as well here in East Central Minnesota. I will say that I'm joining you today from sunny, warm Mora, Minnesota. I'm in the Vasaloppet USA Nordic Center. We just had a big ski race this past weekend called the Vasaloppet USA race, and the conditions were wonderful, and it's now really warm, and they're having a high school ski meet that got rescheduled to today, this afternoon. So I'll be going from this meeting to help with that meet and watch my son ski on a sloppy cross Nordic ski trails. But the other reason, of course, that we're here to talk about digital literacy, and we were the lucky recipients of a Connected Partnership for Connected Minnesota grant. And we stood up a digital navigator project that we'd kind of been working on since the pandemic hit, but the grant gave us the finances to really put it in motion. And so we put digital navigators in all of our school districts to help our families with broadband, with the broadband issues that they have, and we have plenty of them. So I've got lots of things that I can talk about and say about that, and I'll wait to say more until you have questions. So there you go.
Thank you. That's perfect. Paula, you're kind of coming at it from the national perspective. So if I can ask you to introduce yourself, maybe a few words on NDIA and, the usual.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Anne. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm just thrilled to be here and to hear and have a conversation about, how digital navigators and how digital literacy is affecting your communities locally. Just a bit about me. My name is Paulo Balboa. I'm the program and data manager with the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I'm here in Brooklyn, New York. So Minnesota sounds lovely right now from all of your descriptions, but I just have gross piles of melting snow to look out outside. So it sounds nice. But what I'm tasked with at NDIA is running the Digital Navigators program. Everything NDIA does is in collaboration with our network of over 500 affiliates. Those affiliates can be researchers, practitioners, advocates, policymakers. I see several familiar faces on this call already, so some of you may be familiar, you may already be affiliates. But what we do is connect folks on the ground who are doing the work in digital inclusion with each other. Right, so like a Digital Navigators program is a great example of that, because Digital Navigators is, as a concept, is something that from NDIA, like from what we have seen nationally, like people are doing in pockets. Maybe some people aren't calling it Digital Navigators, but they're doing that sort of work. So what NDIA's role is to sort of standardize or try to help standardize the Digital Navigator model. Everything that we have learned from our community, including any tools that we've developed from those conversations, is made available on NDIA's website. We like open, we like everything to be free and available, right? Like my background is in public library, adult education. So like I am all for sharing everything with everyone. NDIA is supporting directly a few projects, which I'll be happy to go into more detail about later on, but that's not the extent of what we're working with. We also have a Digital Navigators working group, which I'll put my email in the chat here. If you are interested in learning more about Digital Navigators and being part of that ongoing sort of organic conversation. We meet bi-weekly every Thursday afternoon. Would be happy and thrilled to have more voices in that working group room to be able to, share out how you are doing it where you are. So yeah, I think that I'll just pause there and send it back to you, Tracy, Anne.
Well, and that's kind of where we sit. And this is, I have questions I can ask, but I'm gonna do the uncharacteristic Zoom thing. I'm just gonna be quiet for a minute, and because I'm sure people have come to these questions as well. So if anybody has a question to get started, that's great.
I can kick off and just start to talk about the different types of projects that we're doing. All right, so like everything that NDIA does, like we want to share with everyone. That means that the way we're running these digital navigators projects is that we want this to be like a replicable, scalable model for different types of organizations, or for organizations who are doing maybe more specialized work. So for instance, we have supported a program with the Local Initiative Support Corporation. The emphasis with that project was Appalachia. So we were working with areas in southeastern Ohio, West Virginia, North and South Carolina, parts of Georgia, with an emphasis on workforce development. So the Local Initiative Support Corporation chose several community-based organizations that were in those geographies and said, okay, now that COVID has hit and you are physically separated from your clients, from the communities that you need to serve, how do you do this? And that's sort of an entry point for a Digital Navigators program. So that was sort of like what I think of as like our workforce development version of Digital Navigators. We're also supporting the Salt Lake City Public Library with a grant funded from the Institute of Museum and Library Services to do what I imagine as the public library version of Digital Navigators, right? They were the program team over there is awesome. I love all of them. They were very intentional about picking partner organizations that were primarily serving underserved communities, underserved neighborhoods in Salt Lake City, which I don't think it will come as a surprise to anyone. Those same communities were also the same communities that were hit hardest by COVID. So like they were really, really trying to uplift neighborhoods of Salt Lake City that are often forgotten about, unfortunately. And then another version of Digital Navigators, we're working with the Department of Labor in Ohio, which the emphasis on that Digital Navigators program is adults over 55 re-entering the workforce, right? So that's like another like highly specific version of what this flexible Digital Navigators model can look like. All of the tools that we use in each of those projects, actually just like an hour ago, I finally added several of those forms to that link in the chat, the Digital Navigator model. Under the resources section of that page, you'll be able to find some of the intake forms that NDIA has developed with our working group with those specific organizations to sort of like formalize what an interaction looks like with a digital navigator and a community member. And I know you come from MLIS background, so like this is kind of like the reference interview. That's how I always like describe this to people. Yeah, but like not everyone comes from the public library background. So like having these forms for folks working in like rural Appalachia, for instance, like this helps them like have sort of a script to walk through. All those forms, like please take those, please use those and adapt them for your needs.
Can I ask a question? Paolo, can you tell us in the like these studies you're doing with the digital navigators, would you say it's equally that they're helping people find devices and internet and digital skills, or is it skewed one way or the other? And are you seeing any gaps in what they're providing?
Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, that's a great question. So I just pulled the data from the Salt Lake City public library project, because we have this quarterly report. So I was just looking at this stuff. It's a great question. In that intake form, in the space where we sort of gather that piece of information, we just ask like, what type of issue is it? And we place it into the 3 buckets. So the digital inclusion stool, so like devices, connectivity, skills. As of last week, when I pulled this data set, 299 people had been helped, and 88% of those interactions were about getting a device. So like overwhelmingly, at least in Salt Lake City, maybe for that particular project, overwhelmingly, that's what people are asking for. I think it was something down to like 2 or 3% of those interactions that have been logged so far were about like getting signed up for like internet essentials, like a home connectivity thing, or specifically about like digital skills or trying to improve digital skills.
It'd be interesting to see then, once people got the device, if they needed the other 2.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we are. Like that program launched in mid-December, so this is just like a very, very early snapshot of where folks are. And I think like talking with the program leadership over there, like a lot of they were sort of realizing like, I mean, it's good that we're getting devices into people's hands, but they were realizing that some of the marketing materials were uplifting that piece a little bit more, aside from like having like a human on the other line, on the end of the line. But yeah, the program runs until September of this year. So, we're going to continue to share out how it continues to evolve and morph as the year goes on.
We did a project.
Go
ahead.
Were they needing devices for the first time, or were they needing devices for upgrades and couldn't afford them?
They were needing devices for the first time. So primarily, there were like Wi-Fi enabled tablets, a lot of Chromebooks. There was a smaller inventory of like refurbished desktops or laptops, but the majority of these devices are handheld tablets.
Are the people that are seeking your services more younger people looking for jobs, looking for a future, or are there older? Like I'm 77 and still struggling with being really good at handling working remotely at home. Are older people trying to get devices so that they can interact remotely with their physicians and things like that?
Yeah, from what we've seen so far, sort of, and this is like from the data standpoint, like each of the bins of like the age groups is pretty equally distributed. There is a slight preference for adults over 60, like that's like the last bin there, but it's been pretty evenly distributed. Like they're in the notes section, just reading through the data set that we've been able to pull so far. Like several of the notes are young people who are recently graduated from their undergrad degree, and like COVID makes the job market hard for everyone, but they're looking to maybe make a switch to a different sort of career. So with the library, they're getting connected with like a free lynda.com tutorial, something like that. On the flip side, with older folks, we are seeing like the types of specific issues that older folks are interested in learning about is, as you mentioned, Becky, getting connected with their healthcare providers, like their online portal, so they can like see all of their information, or getting connected with their online, or getting connected with online banking. So there is a hunger to do like the lifelong learning piece, which is encouraging.
We also saw in our project, we were giving out 500 laptops and Wi-Fi and hotspots. And some of them did go to people over 80 years old. And what they really wanted them for was to connect with families during this, through Zoom in this time. And they definitely needed the devices and the hotspots, but they needed a lot of training too on how to use them, and just for like Zoom, for example. So I'm wondering, when you give out when these places have given out devices, what are the digital navigators doing to help people acclimate to them or know how to use them, or does everyone already know how to use them?
Go ahead. Did you have, Paulo, you can say something. I can tell you about it. You go ahead, and then I can tell about just our experience too.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so that, like, how the digital navigator continues to follow up with them is sort of what we're trying to prescribe with those forms that we're making available on the website. So like we have the intake form, which is just like general info about the community member. That's followed up with a short skills assessment. So that's where the digital navigator is walking someone through a set of questions like, I want to use the internet to connect with family. I want to use the internet to apply for jobs, what have you. So that builds some working knowledge for the digital navigator to think like, okay, this is what you need help with, even though you may not have like the vocabulary or the language to describe what you need help with, which I think is like, that's the reference interview part of all this stuff. There's also an exit survey where the digital navigator is just like recording the end of the interaction. But I think, to speak to your point, Teresa, there's also a follow-up survey. So the digital navigator is constantly checking in at regular intervals with someone that they work with to just say like, how's it going? Like, are you feeling better about, surfing the internet or finding about events in your community? So we're just entering that stage in this project where we're beginning to collect that sort of follow-up survey information.
So thanks, Paul. I'm Mark Johnson again from MECMEC, and we have a project in our 14 schools, very school focused, right? So, we had, and I want to say my appreciation to Paolo and the NDIA. They were in kind of the early stages of developing this digital navigator idea back, a year ago, when we sort of first started taking a look at it. We did utilize over the summer, the materials and resources that they had already made available, job descriptions and sort of plans and ideas and some of the forms in our project. So it was very, very beneficial. And I appreciate their openness and willing to share all of that, because that made our project a whole lot easier. But we put these digital navigators in the schools. And at the same time, we also trained our librarians and our library staff in East Central Minnesota, part of the East Central Regional Library System. We didn't directly follow up with them as much. So some of the questions you've been asking about outside of a school environment, when we're in a school environment, we know some of what they need, right? These students have needs. They have to be able to connect to their classes. They have to be able to do all of, this kind of work. So some of the other pieces in terms of job searching, medical access to medical care, things like that were a little bit on the periphery of what we were doing, but we did have the library staff that were working with the community, and we're going to be following up with them to find out what they did that wasn't directly part of our, in our control, so to speak. But I know that they did it. Part of our big partnership with them was, first of all, a place that community members could go besides the school to get information outside of school hours. And they oftentimes had spaces that they were making available to people to come in to utilize. And so having the digital navigator skills and training, the library staff was able to help community members with that. They also had access devices, hotspots, things like that for checkout. So the schools had a whole lot of those that we were giving to people, and we used part of our digital navigator project. And Bernadine mentioned that, in rural areas, connectivity might be more of an issue. And in our area, that's very, very much true. So we were working, our digital navigators were working very hard with families about just getting connectivity. And we found out, of course, that's two-pronged, right? We had people who just couldn't get connectivity, and sometimes giving them a hotspot, which is a cellular device, right, was not the answer either, because they just were too far away from a cell tower to be, And so we were having to get creative with other places that they could go and other ways. And sometimes that involved the libraries and sometimes that involved other places. But we also found a large affordability issue. One of our larger districts came to me early on and said, you know, and their digital navigator had to work extremely hard because when they first did a little survey about who was having issues with internet access, that came back with a very large number of families, of students and families, and a whole lot of them were in a community that was very well served. And so we had to dig into that a little bit and say, what's the issue going on here? And it turns out it was very much an affordability issue. So we were able to work with a provider and get some you know, lower cost options for those families that were in that community. So all of those things, you know, come into play, very much so. And to, you know, thinking about a couple of your questions about we're working on digging in now that we're sort of past, kids are coming back to school, we're past that intense portion of what the digital navigators have been doing. They are now doing a lot of follow-up, and we're doing some research on what were the issues and so on. I can tell you that we also had built into our project some tech support opportunities. We had built in that continued contact that Paulo talked about, having the digital navigators make sure they reach out to families and say, are you having issues? What are you having problems with? And we found that the tech support piece was almost not needed. I mean, it was in some cases, right? So it's good that it was there, but it was way less than we thought. So people were able to get the devices working. It's just they needed the access and they needed a device to access on. So we found it wasn't so much that wasn't so much an issue as it was just getting going. So yeah.
I have a question. I'd really like to thread the needle with education, training, and workforce development. Is the digital navigator somebody who is has a credential or a certification, something that would allow them to move up the tech career ladder in terms of employment and education and training? Does it qualify them for anything?
I'll speak from our point of view, and then Paulo maybe has some things to add from projects that he's worked with. In our situation, we worked with our districts to find somebody who they thought was most appropriate, meaning in our case that they had some, I mean, they were a local person, right, within the school, likely had some position in the school already, right? That meant they knew families and they knew some of the issues that were happening within their own school district. We did not say that they needed to have strong technical skills, although many of them came to us with that. But our thought was we can train them in terms of the immediate technical skills that they need. So in answer to your question is, we had some people who I think improved their skills greatly, very quickly, because they had to, right? I mean, in order to be able to help these families and understand what was going on, they needed to acquire those skills fairly quickly. And I think that probably did move some of these people, you know, up the ladder. And I think the people working around them learned a lot too. So that's maybe a quick answer. I don't know if that hit the mark or not, but.
Well, what you're saying is that you needed people to have more skills than just being tech savvy. They needed to be within the system. They needed to do outreach. But in terms of this kind of career path, having real currency in the marketplace, that's what interests me. And also tying it to the Federal Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act dollars that funds, for instance, at-risk youth across the state. It has to be tied to some kind of certificate. So I'm thinking about the ability to recruit young people to be digital navigators, and then to get them onto a career pathway. Economically disadvantaged students in Southeast Minnesota don't go anywhere near the IT career pathways. So if there are entry points that would upskill people as well as help them provide a service, that's what I'm trying to get at. And then Paulo, are there any navigators, digital navigators, that earn some kind of certification for the service they deliver?
Sure. Yeah. So when the first few projects, the first few digital navigator programs that we've gotten off the ground have been similar to what Mark was describing, like folks who are already in the community. That's why like someone working at a public library made sense, because that's kind of what they already did. But as far as like what you're describing, like being prescriptive about having a certification that a digital navigator can earn out of this sort of work, actually this is highly relevant. The program that NDIA is supporting in Ohio, the organization's called Vantage Aging, they're using North Star. They're using North Star digital literacy to have the digital navigator work through North Star modules first for their own knowledge base and also to earn certification, but also so that the digital navigator will be able to to sort of like teach a community member through those same modules later on. So that project is still in like this background learning process. Like we haven't began direct service, but I'm excited for that because that's the first time we're seeing like certification enter the digital navigator sphere. So I'm really excited to see what comes out of that with the support of Teresa and Joe and their team over there.
Thank you.
Yeah, and North Star is working with several states on getting, especially the state of Pennsylvania, on getting recognized by the workforce board there as our certifications recognized. So that is really exciting for us. And I do think it is a way for training, like Paula was saying, training the digital navigators. I also I've heard in NDIA, meetings that we've had together, the group in Seattle that's training digital navigators from community-based organizations, BIPOC communities, and then as a second step, training them to be tech support. That's kind of what you're saying, Burke, like not necessarily certification, but kind of a stepping stone to higher level IT. And maybe that's about all I know of it. Maybe Paula, you can talk more about it. But
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay, Paolo. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Teresa's absolutely correct. Like that's the Seattle Public Library, or sorry, the King County Library System is getting a digital navigator training, and that cohort is so in that training, like they're being a little bit more direct about saying like this translates into tech support. Another program that we don't work directly with, but we are friends with, I guess, like we share resources, is in the city of Philadelphia. And the city of Charlotte, actually. Both of their versions of digital navigators are through their city's 211 systems, like the city like information line, which when I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes total sense, because that's like who's a community member would call anyway if they needed help with something. But those folks on the 211 tech support line are already trained to do like this sort of like technical support. They just have this added element of like of digital equity, really, that which is what digital navigators adds.
Well, I'm actually looking at a kind of a broader landscape in terms of equity and inclusion in the field of IT and communication. I see that Lee Herr has asked some very pointed, good questions here. But I would just say that the data shows that we have almost no students going into IT. In career and technical education, there's 1%, 2% of students of color going into CTE fields. That means access to more high demand, high tech wages and jobs in rural Minnesota. We recently did a proportionality gap here in Red Wing. And if there was real proportional representation in teaching and staff, we would need to hire 40 people of color, right? We need 41 people of color to teach. Right now, there's one teacher of color. So in all of Southeast Minnesota, there is not a single teacher of color in career and technical education. So there is a link between students going into tech, you know, and so that's one side of the equation. The other side is that there's a disconnect between what workforce development will fund and leverage and what education will certify. And there's also an incredibly murky place in the post-secondary training. So what happens in high school and what happens after high school before college, it's all entry level, but it's not certified. And the currency in the marketplace is we need a certificate, we need it certified. So we can't really be talking about digital equity and inclusion unless we've flattened those barriers, and what we're providing is actually giving people access to high-skilled jobs with certifications and a connection to career pathways in the digital space, in the IT space. And so I'm very grateful for this information, and don't mean to be dropping a bomb, but I think that there's also a lot of exploitation in the career and technical education space, where teachers are asked to take on extra things that they don't get extra credit. They don't move up the career ladder. So I don't know what you think about that.
Burke, I have a quick follow-up question. This is Joe Miller from Literacy Minnesota. Who would grant the certification? Is this like a Minnesota Department certificate that says that this person is eligible to be a digital navigator and that has currency, as you said, in the marketplace?
Well, I don't know nationally what the national organizations like the Paulos would refer to for certifications, but in Minnesota, we follow certifications from the federal government to the state agencies, but the state agencies aren't always talking to each other. So Department of Education and Department of Employment and Economic Development, workforce development isn't necessarily certifying what education is. So it's sort of like the conundrum of what it takes to qualify to graduate from high school doesn't qualify you to enter college. So it's a disconnect that creates another barrier. So I don't know, this is new to me about digital navigators, Joe. I'd like to know if they could be credentialed in some way and not a phony credential.
I think too, you should look at another way to look at it is not just the digital navigators, but providing digital skills to everyone.
Yeah.
And which has, you know, like we've been talking about, you know, there has to be devices, there has to be access and the digital skills. And that's often a piece that's, you know, not the immediate need perhaps, or not funded, but through the workforce systems, you, as Joe put in the chat, you all do have North Star, which does provide these certificates. So it's a way to help many people with basic digital literacy, and then they can go on to higher IT type training programs, which some have. So that's, and actually I'm going to be giving workforce centers a training on how to use North Star in the coming months. So you can learn more from that.
Great.
But I think
send us more info on that when that comes up, because I'll make sure to share that.
Sure.
Out. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. This I think is fascinating. This is a big topic when I did my master's degree in library science, because you'd be called accidental techies, which kind of meant you weren't going up anywhere, you know. But this is when you're in graduate school, even it was the accidental techies, you know. But so I think that's fascinating. I could talk about this, but I want to make sure that we get to Lee Hurst's question as well. And Lee, I can try to read it on my shiny screen, or you unmute if you want to, but I'll start, you know, asking, what might a digital navigator program focused on limited English proficiency family communities with children in pre-12 look like? And then what are key components that a program like this must have to ensure the maximum efficacy? What is training like for digital navigators to ensure that they can effectively provide support in languages other than English to convey relatively complex words and concepts like satellite, we need that for everybody. Never mind satellite, mobile hotspots, internet speed that don't always translate well in different languages. I partially wanted to read that for the recording, but I hope it's okay if I pull out that question too while we're still a little time.
Because filling awkward silence is one of my superpowers that I didn't necessarily ask for. Paolo did it last time. I got to do it this time. So in our area, we don't have a huge population of limited English proficiency students, though we certainly have some. I think in a digital navigator area, I think we've talked about all these different skills that maybe those folks need. And right now, really the concept of digital navigator is pretty new still. So all of these ideas about where to take it are great. And I think there's a lot of potential there. But I think finding the right people to do it is the key. And I think, and we said, do they have to have a lot of tech skills? Well, no, not necessarily, because you can train them in that. We've talked about the opportunities for being able to train those folks. We found the most important thing was their communication skills. They just need to be really good communicators. And from an LEP point of view, then you add that secondary piece on it, is they have to be able to communicate with those families in their language. And that makes it potentially more difficult, because now you not only have to find somebody who is generally good at that, but you also have to find somebody who can do it in the language. And I think to answer, this may be not a great answer, but I'm going to just give you my 2 cents worth anyway. So that's one thing, is finding the right person with that right skill set. The other thing that I think translates not just to limited English proficiency, but as Ann was saying, a lot of people need help with that. What's the difference between cellular and satellite and blah, all of these different things, right? So a lot of people need that. You can train folks that are going to be the digital navigators with that information, but then they have to be able to convey that to the families and the people that they're working with. And sometimes what we've found is that's just meant you really have to hold their hand through it. And you just have to, you have to meet them where they are. And they say, okay, if it's a new family that's getting a cellular hotspot for the first time, and they generally have an idea of how to turn it on, and you turn it on and it works, right? But, you have to hold their hand through that process of saying, okay, maybe it's not terrifically important that they know exactly what that device does, but to say, hey, this has to communicate with something outside and far away, which means put it in your window, because that might be better. And if they don't understand why, you get an opportunity then to explain a little bit about it and about how it works by helping them through a couple of different steps in making this device, work for them, and giving them their options. I don't know, that's not a great answer probably to that question, but really to me, it's about finding the people who are communicators and then giving them the skills to be able to communicate with the folks that they're working with.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the chat. This is Jeff. I think when we think about what people typically call hard to serve communities, right? It's hard to serve if you're not, part of the community and you haven't figured it out yet, right? So I think a strategy could be getting, like Mark just finished with, right? Finding those people who are good communicators and trusted in their community, and then developing their skills gradually to provide this digital navigator service. I think that's an important, if I could draw a line under something today, it would be that, communication and relationship first, technology second, at least from my view. People can disagree.
Thank you, Jeff. And I'm going to play the role of, you guys know, World Cafe, where you're at different tables and you come in and populate from what happened. So Mary and I were just in a meeting before this with the grantees of the program that Mark mentioned from the Partnership for Connected MN. That was an effort to bring resources right into this space of devices, connectivity, and the skills to use it. and inviting a very diverse group of grantees to reflect together on what they were learning about the work. And my big learning, my big aha was kind of an embodiment of what we've heard from Mark and others, that it's the relationship is the coin of the realm. And so where we often look to tech partners, like I'll just, for example, PCs for People, whose, job it is to do this, that really to think of them as a assistant, a technical capacity to the organization that holds the relationship with the community. So from a systems perspective, and I'm bringing it up a notch, Brooke, not just from the individual worker, but where are you going to look in the system to find who holds those relationships, that it may be community, to Jeff's point, community support organizations, social service agencies, people that see and have the family at the center, and then you bring that tech support to them. So that was a real, for me, kind of an aha crystallization in hearing the super community organizer from Eastside St. Paul knocking on doors and starting from that family relationship and then bringing the tech piece to the relationship.
This is Barbara. I just want to add that one of the things in our ever evolving Blandin community project down here is initially we thought a lot about community ed. And of course, community ed is huge, very important, all those relationships. Everything's gone online, and yet the access for people to be able to get online and do that has been a real challenge. And it's one of the things we're putting back on our work list, is to look at community ed and how can we re-engage them in this work.
I'm sorry, I'm responding in the chat. I missed that question if that was directed to me.
Well, Barbara, you were just talking about engaging community ed in something like this. And I think that's a great idea. I think there's a lot of opportunity for that. And I think in the schools, because community ed is a function of generally of the school districts, we understand more than ever the importance of this. And I think that might help, right, to make that a good pairing. In other words, since the schools are understanding it, hopefully the community, the school would be open to bringing that in as a community education type of program, perhaps in the future.
So Mark, did you connect up with community ed and the work that you did up there? Were they a part of your group?
We didn't this time because it was so reactive. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
We were reacting so quickly to what was going on that just hadn't been something that we had thought of at that point yet. We connected with the library. That was sort of the piece, the community outreach piece that we were able to make work at that point. But I think it's a great thought for the future, for sure.
So one thing to answer your question in the chat, Lee, a little bit, or maybe address it a little bit, is we have found, again, through North Star. So Literacy Minnesota, we serve for over almost 50 years. We've served people who are adults who are coming to our schools to learn English, is one of the major groups of people that we serve. And so when we wrote the North Star Digital Literacy, it was at an intermediate English language learner level, so that we could use that terminology and looking at it from a low English language learner level, but also a very low digital literacy level. And I think you're right. It's very hard, especially for those of us who are, feel pretty confident in our digital literacy skills, to remember what it's like to not even know how to use a mouse or how to, connect to the internet. And so, so the materials that we did looked at kind of marrying those two fields so that we were talking about it in a way that people could understand. Because if you say something like, click on the link, if you don't know anything about the internet, that's meaningless. But that's something that we would say all the time. So I think your point is well taken, that we really have to, it's like teaching someone to read. You really have to be cognizant of that beginning level and how you talk about it, and consistency in how you talk about it. And then like Mark is saying, you know, having the trust there as well with the digital navigator.
I am going to hop out here. I am, it's unlike Mark. I have that degree in library science. I can be quiet a long time and let people talk, but I do want to let folks know, and I appreciate the people who talk. You guys are the experts, and that's from all of you in the room. I do want to say we're almost to 1 o'clock. I don't know. Usually we're very sly about this. I don't know if you noticed that my daughter just grabbed my credit card, and so I got to go look at her here in a minute. You know, Claire, for folks who weren't on earlier, I'm almost back to St. Paul from Chicago. We have a little pit stop in Eau Claire so that I could do this. I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody, and I want to give folks for a last minute, but I want to remind folks that we have twice a month, we have these Blandin Broadband lunch bunch meetings. The first one, which is I think the second Wednesday of the month, is usually focused on infrastructure or policy. And that next one is on March 10th. And the topic for that day is infrastructure benefits of publicly owned broadband networks. So that should be a good one. And then the next one we have kind of related to digital use is really about smart cities, a little bit of Internet of Things. Friday, I interviewed folks who started a group called Smart North, and they actually are looking for rural communities to come and take a part of learning about how to be a smart town. So they'll be some of the experts, but I'm hoping we can also speak more generally about that. And that is on March 24th. And I have put those links in the chat. And I want to say thank you, but I want to give, if anybody has a last minute, especially to Mark and Paulo, if you have anything you want to say before we part. And then Mary too.
No, just thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for joining. If you have questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, check the chat real quick. I put my email address in there, and our information is there as well. Get a hold of me anytime.
Yep, just want to echo that. Thanks for having me. Nice to see some familiar faces. Nice to see some new faces. My emails in the chat. You know, this is an ongoing conversation, so feel free to reach out whenever. This is literally all I think about, so I'm happy to chat with you at any time.
Thank you both. Mary, am I missing anything?
No, I think you got it all covered, but yeah, I need to hop off to the same meeting that Bernadine just went to, so I'm gonna say goodbye to everyone right now.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thanks.